76, and I was embarrassed. That's what I scored in my ICSE grade 10 math exam. Now for most people, a 76 is rather respectable. But for my parents, it was less of a job well done and more of a we need to talk. And if you're from an Indian household, you know that a we need to talk isn't just a conversation. It's a straight up performance review. I didn't get a 76 because I was defeated by surface area and volume formulas. And honestly, the formulas weren't even the issue. My own thoughts were. I got a 76 because of a message I received earlier that day. 4 words. This probably won't work. And that single line stuck in my head like a song that I didn't even like, but I couldn't stop humming. Suddenly, math and algebra weren't the biggest of my problems, but my own thoughts were. My brain decided it was time to plan and play a full psychological thriller, alternate endings, background music, plot twists. And I know I'm not alone here. Many of us over here have had that one comment or that one message completely hijack our entire day and shifted our focus. And well, if you haven't, welcome to the world of an overthinker. It's where we're acting, directing, and also emotionally suffering in our own OTT drama series. And since this was grade 10, changes physically and mentally, I thought this was something unique only my brain could do, like a premium subscription. But as I grew older and I met more people, I realized that I wasn't the only one living with an unpaid, overreactive, full-time director writing up crazy stories in my head, but we all have one. And getting a teenager to stop overthinking, especially when the YouTube feed looks like this, yeah, that's exceptionally hard. Overthinking is pretty standard. Nearly 73% of 25 to 35-year-olds overthink daily, and around 1 in 3 teens do as well. And considering there are 1.4 billion adolescents in the world, that means around 433 million of them overthink daily. And that's not a small issue. That's statistically the biggest group chat in the history of the world. But you know what's the most annoying part about overthinking? It's timing. Overthinking will come at the most unexpected times, when you're trying to focus, live life, or when you're trying to go to sleep, when your brain suddenly remembers that slightly awkward thing you said to that one person back in 2017, and suddenly you're back to a movie. But here's what I realized during my theory of knowledge class. And well, for those of you who don't know what theory of knowledge is, it's a class where a teacher walks in and politely, very politely, convinces you that nothing you know is actually certain. And at one point, my teacher nearly convinced us that a bottle isn't a bottle, and after that class, I stopped trusting objects. But the questions that he asked me that day made me overthink, and not in a manner where my brain decided it was time to plan and play a full psychological thriller, but I was asking the right questions, the ones that I wanted to be asking. And it didn't even happen consciously. It simply happened because I was given boundaries to think within and a certain target to chase. And I like to call this strategic overthinking. This type of overthinking is rather slower, quieter, more intentional, and not just a wild goose chase. Instead of spirals that take you absolutely nowhere, this helps you imagine solutions. It's like the difference between a magnifying glass and a prism. The prism scatters light everywhere while the magnifying glass focuses the beam to a particular point. But you know what's the funniest part about both of these types of overthinking? They have the same origin. But strategic overthinking tells you to take a deep breath, relax, recollect yourself, and think with purpose and intent. And this is only possible when you decide what thoughts are the most important to you. You see, it's not just about thinking, but it's about thinking with purpose and intent. But the obvious question remains, how do we stop overthinking from spiraling out of control and actually use it to grow? Here's a simple framework I came up with, which I like to call role assignment. Essentially, you give your overthinking one out of the 2 jobs, the clarifier or the constructor. Because let's be honest, overthinking without bounds is dangerous. And most of us try and stop overthinking the same way that we try and stop background noise, by fighting it. But our brain doesn't like being told what it needs to be doing. So the trick is to give it something better to do. Ask it what's next instead of what ifs. Present it with a situation and ask it to explain it to you. Here's an example. Imagine somebody texts you, we need to talk. As an overthinker, in the next 30 seconds, here's what you've imagined. The end of the friendship, what was your fault, and most importantly, your exile from society. But the clarifier simply steps in and is like, do you even know what they want to talk about? I want you to think of clarifier as that brutally honest friend who refuses to let you be dramatic. Take, for example, the message that I spoke about earlier in my talk. So my brain was like, this probably won't work. My life is over. But the clarifier walked in and he was like, dude, relax. What exactly won't work? Do you even have enough information before you draw conclusions? Or are you just writing fan fiction about your own stories? And let's be honest, if overthinking was a story writing competition, most of us would have been in first place. But what I want you to focus on is the fact that when you make your thoughts and your questions precise, you make the problem small enough to be handled without being overwhelmed. Essentially, you frame your questions in a manner where you're not having a confrontation with the opposing person, but you seek clarity. And no, that does not mean you go and solve the mysteries of the cosmos, but when I say you seek clarity, I mean to understand if what is happening with you is in your power to control or not. Because most of us go about overthinking simply because we don't know what we can control and what we can't. And once the clarifier is done interrogating the situation, the next employee walks in, the constructor. I want you to think of the constructor as the engineer of your thoughts. Its job is not to panic, but to plan. Use the constructor to run simulations in your head, the ones that you want to be seeing. Use it to plan and anticipate for problems that are yet to come. And no, that doesn't mean you run that same message again and again in your head and suddenly you imagine a perfect ending where everything works out in your favor. That's not planning, that's delusion. The constructor's job is to make your life easier. It essentially walks in and asks, what might go wrong and what can I do about it? Realistically, of course. Here's an example. When I was working on one of my STEM projects, the judges came up to me and asked us, what would you do about the heavy metals in the human waste? Now, if you're an overthinker, here's what's happening in your head. What if I don't have an answer? What if they ask us this tomorrow? What if we lose? And that's exactly where the spiraling begins. We don't want to spiral. So here's what happened in my brain. I first used the clarifier to understand where we stood. So my brain was like, okay, we have an issue. But we've also found a solution which primarily works only for liquids. Then the constructor walked in and it was like, cool, we've understood what's happening. Now tell me something. What do you think could realistically be the next thing that the judges would have asked us? And the answer was pretty obvious. How does a solution that works for liquid waste be applied to solid waste? But we didn't panic. We planned. We put it on our challenges slide, and we acknowledged the limitation even before they could question it. Now, was this a perfect solution? No, but it was a smart response. It showed to them that we thought ahead. And back then, we were 16 and 17. Sending your slides on time was in itself an achievement, let alone figuring out how to remove heavy metals from solid waste. But these two jobs give your thoughts, your questions, directions. Because most of us go about overthinking something like this. Something triggers you, you overanalyze it, it stresses you out, and you overanalyze it all over again, draining you on something that you probably couldn't even have helped. Overthinking wasn't our pulling down factor, but unemployed overthinking was. One thought led to one question. One question led to one design. One design led to an experiment, and that experiment was a ripple, shifting from distractions to directions. I always viewed overthinking as something that I needed to get rid of, something that I needed to silence. It cost me marks, sleep, relationships, and most importantly, prevented me from enjoying a peace of mind. But as time went on, I realized that that same mind that had once distracted me before exams could suddenly be channelized in a manner where I was questioning the unsolvable. And this shift only took place because I ensured which thoughts were important to me. It's like water. When allowed to spill, floods the place. But you channelize it, and suddenly you can power cities, which is honestly a much better use than running that one conversation that you had back in 2019 when Discord was a thing. But that 76 wasn't the end of my world. It was a ripple forcing me to understand how my brain worked. And once I understood it, I started working with it, not against it. So if you're somebody who thinks too much, replays conversations in your head, or even imagine scenarios that haven't even happened yet, don't try and shut your brain because it doesn't like it. Train it to ask better questions, the ones that you want to be asking. It won't happen in one day, but if you try every day, trust me, you will get there. Overthinking will always exist, whether we allow it to make movies in our heads or aim it at solving problems. How we use it is on us, to shake us or shape us, because the thoughts that often pull us apart are the ones that push you forward. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.